In the late 70s, Skytrain was in its heyday. Millions of passengers were flying Laker Airways across the Atlantic. Laker had become a symbol of free enterprise and value. No one could match his fares.
All these major airlines had huge overheads, hotels and resorts and all sorts of things, all supported. So they had higher prices. Those overheads Laker didn't have. What Freddie did is he took the cost of operating the airplane across the ocean and back, and then put the profit margin on top of that. And that was the fare structure.
Laker offered a no booking in advance service, but he needed a ticket office conveniently located for his passengers.
Because the Gatwick train services departed from Victoria railway station, we decided that a sales office in Victoria would be most appropriate, and so found this little arcade in Victoria station, and we turned that into our Skytrain ticket sales office.
Ticket sales reached their peak in the summer of 1978.
Well, 345 people queued on the street for the first day's flight, and then behind them another 345 people for the second day's flight, and before long there were about 10 or 12 days flights queuing on the streets and living in plastic bags and cardboard boxes here on the streets of Victoria.
People flooded to it. You couldn't fill the aircraft quick enough, and that was the secret: fill the aeroplanes.
As a natural self-publicist, Laker took every opportunity to grab the headlines.
The press needed Freddie because they needed something to write about, and here was a really feel-good story. And Freddie needed the press to promote Laker Airways, so it was a symbiotic relationship which worked for both sides.
He was posing alongside aircraft, he was doing everything but standing on his head. He would open his mouth and produce a story, he'd strike a pose and produce a picture. I mean, this was Freddie Laker.
At least 50% of our promotion and publicity was Freddie Laker himself, and that was worth its weight in gold.
The man the public saw was a visionary and a salesman. His staff saw another Freddie Laker.
He would know the chap sweeping the hangar floor. He'd know the engineers working on the aircraft. He'd probably know their wives' names and their children's names.
They all thought that they were friends of Freddie, and it was extraordinary talent.
He could inspire people to work for less than they could earn elsewhere. He could inspire people to work harder than they thought they were capable of working.
He was a great boss. He was good to work for. We had our ups and downs. We had lots of ups and downs, but he was very fair.
The pilots would meet, the flight attendants would meet, and any problems we had to sort out, Freddie would be there, and we'd sort them out amongst ourselves and just get on with the job.
Laker Airways was a stripped-down operation. It was Laker's attention to detail that gave him a competitive edge.
We were one of the only airlines who would rally-wax the outside of our aircraft fuselages because we had found that they slipped through the air more easily, and this reduced fuel consumption.
Freddie Laker was always watching costs.
Freddie introduced a system where each takeoff would be calculated with the minimum power necessary to put the aircraft into the air. Freddie had his pilots calculate the exact thrust necessary on that day with that wind and that air pressure and the load of passengers. And this extended the life of the engine significantly.
In 1978, Laker received a knighthood for his services to the airline industry. He developed a friendship with the new Conservative Party leader, Margaret Thatcher. The future Prime Minister hailed him as an icon of free enterprise. But business success again came with marriage breakdown. Laker's second marriage ended after 7 years. He remarried to American-born Patricia Gate. They had a son, Freddie Allen.
When I was very young, I do remember spending an incredible amount of time on the phone. I remember sitting in his office, at the age of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I was just kind of cuddling up with him. He was definitely a workaholic, but I still think he was a great dad.
Laker was at the pinnacle of his career. Already running an iconic business, he wanted to expand still further.
He'd expanded places like Miami, great, and to California. Those routes all made sense. But then he began to lose it a bit. He began to fly
from places like Prestwick in Scotland and to places like Tampa in Florida, which at the time was simply not ready. There was no market there, and so it's a classic case of over-expansion.
His greatest strength was believing in Freddie Laker, and his greatest weakness was probably in believing in Freddie Laker.
The cracks began to show when the world recession kicked in the early 80s.
You had the weakness of the pound, and don't forget you bought fuel in dollars and he paid for his aircraft in dollars, but his income was in pounds. So that meant a huge loss.
Laker Airways was slipping into trouble. Freddie's competitors saw their chance to force him out of business.
Wherever we took our fares, they moved to match us, pound for pound. And in doing so, they were operating at below cost in order to drive this competitor out. That was their solution to the Laker problem.
There was something else at work, which was that they were talking to the aircraft manufacturers and saying, maybe you're being a bit too kind to Freddie Laker, and maybe if you carry on doing that, we won't buy your aircraft in future.
Laker's main suppliers, McDonnell Douglas and GE, had initially agreed to inject £5 million to keep his company afloat. But now, under intense pressure, they were about to withdraw their financing. Laker had no idea that he was on the edge of a precipice. The catastrophe that followed still haunts his friends today.
It's 25 years ago.